And I work with Greenwood on helping to run our children's church and our ministry there. And other than that, I serve as a school teacher in the daytime and a stage manager / theater director in the nighttime. So what is sleep? And I will pass it over to our next panelist.
Hi, I'm Reverend Veronica Fuzz, and I'm the pastor of Daintyville CME Church.
Whoop, whoop.
My name is Reverend Javante Baker. I'm the pastor of Winrose St. Paul CME Church. I serve in the district as the Christian Index writer. I serve in the Connection as the Connectional Young Adult Ministry Parliamentarian. Oh, my apologies. And within the annual conference as the Young Adult Director.
Good evening. I'm Reverend Alan Mitchell, pastor of Cleves Memorial CME Church in Oakland, Tennessee.
Good afternoon. I'm Cameron Kirkendall. I am the associate minister here at Mount Olive Cathedral CME Church. Glad to be with you all.
And I'm Reverend Joseph Jordan, the pastor, proud pastor of Spring Hill CME Church, the place where the spring never runs dry and it flows with love.
Give us a moment as we work through technical difficulties. Amen. Everybody clap for the computer. Yes, yes, there we go. Praise and worship gonna shift the atmosphere. Come on. As we wait, Jarvis Williams was a pastor, and while he was pastoring, he had a calling from God to leave pastoring and turned into a pro-democracy organizer. Sometimes the work God calls you for is outside of the pulpit. Sometimes it's outside of the four walls. Sometimes it doesn't include a salary. Sometimes you won't get paid. Sometimes it doesn't look like black church as usual. Sometimes it doesn't look like what it used to look like when you was growing up. So he was called into something different. And one thing I have learned about being called, just because you're being called to pastor or to preach doesn't mean you're not being called for something else. He is now connected to us. So I will turn it over to Jarvis Williams so he can introduce himself and also give you an overview of the article he wrote, and then we will go into our question and answers with the panel.
Are y'all able to hear me?
Still having technical difficulties. The Holy Spirit is still working in this place. But as you heard some of the retired preachers say, they started out as Sunday school teachers. Some of them were steward board chairs. So your calling can start one way, but it can transform into something else. And Jarvis Williams is one of those whose calling has transformed him into something else other than just pastoring. We all up here have had numerous conversations with each other on our spiritual gifts, our callings, and being bi, tri, and quad vocational. Because sometimes that is what it takes to get the job done. Sometimes it looks different for you than it does for me. Sometimes you need friends like these that I have to get you through the storm and the rain. Sometimes you need somebody praying for you when you don't know you have somebody praying for you. But in the gist of things, Jarvis writes an article where he's interviewed, and the columnist writes an article about the interview. And the title of the interview is "We Have What We Need to Fix This." I believe we all look at our congregations, look at our communities, look at our school districts, look at our community centers, look all around the world and say, what can we do to make a difference? But the answer is we already have what it takes to fix this. A lot of times we say, well, if they don't know how to read, we can help them learn how to read. We know what it takes to fix this, so why aren't we doing it? We see homeless people on the streets. I'm sorry, the proper term is unsheltered. Unsheltered people on the streets, hungry, thirsty. People need water. It's 100 degrees outside and 99 in here. we know that people are hungry. And like Bishop said, not just on Thanksgiving and Christmas. So why aren't we feeding them? We know how to fix a lot of the problems that we see every day. But why aren't we doing those things to solve those problems? I will go into my first question while we are still waiting. The interviewer, Betsy Shirley, asked, as a pro-democracy organizer, how would you describe what happens in the U.S. in the past few months? And Jarvis replied, and I just took a snippet of his rebuttal. He replied, if I'm talking with Christians, I will talk about the inability of us as political community to demonstrate equal concern for all people. We have forgotten how powerful sharing is. We have created a political demonstration of the refusal to keep striving to share what we have. I know we love to say the black church is the black church. The black community is the black community. We have to stick together, but we also have to share. Share our talent, share our gifts. So for the first question, I will ask the panel, in a world where it is so easy to share with a click of a button on all social media platforms, why do you think it is so hard for us to share with others that don't look like us, think like us, worship like us, believe in what we believe in, live on the same side of town as us, earn the same yearly income as us, or even love the same way we love in the world we live in today?
I must talk first because I'm a little more short-winded than the rest of my friends. I love y'all. I have two things to say about that. Number one, I want to say that I think it's because that we don't think that the other groups understand what we're going through. Like we have that thought that as black women, white women don't understand black women issues. We have the issue of people who are single people don't understand what married people are going through. Like there's just that thought that if you have not walked in my shoes, then you don't understand. I also think the other part of that is the fact that we are selfish. We kind of don't want people to have a shared experience with us so that our journey can be unique and we can have our own type of voice and our own issue and our own platform to stand on, to let us stand out. So again, one, I think we don't think that it is a collective shared experience. And the other thing, I think that we're kind of selfish and wanting to have our own mountain to stand on.
I just think we overcomplicate it. We think in order to share a little bit, we have to give up everything. And we fail to see what's already there. So for example, I have a friend who worked with the church in Atlanta with their homeless ministry. And one of the biggest things that people who don't have a permanent residence face is they don't have a mailing address. There's a lot of governmental things. Take, for instance, you need a birth certificate. Let's say somebody steals your license. You have to have a birth certificate, social security card, all of this paperwork. Let's say that gets stolen. How does it get mailed to you? There's nowhere for it to go. And a lot of government agencies will not send it to a post office. So one of the things that church offered was a permanent address. So if you came and you said, hey, I don't have a permanent address, Could I use the church's address? Then they say, yeah, give me your name. We'll make you a little P.O. box. And it's simple. It doesn't take any materials that is not already at your church. Boom, people would come, and now they have access. Now a safe place that their personal information can go to, right? They know, okay, well, the church is not gonna steal my birth certificate and my social security card and all of my personal information, hopefully. And so there's a safe place they could have important documents mailed to, and they could start to get back on their feet, and then they could apply to get that license, and then could they get a job? Right? You lose your license, you don't even qualify for a job anymore. So just that simple act, I think we fail to see. We make it too complicated. It's stuff that we already have that can support everybody in our community and even outside of our community, but we think support has to be so difficult. And it can be easier than we make it sometimes.
Right. The next question that was asked, she asked, I notice you're not using political words like constitutional crisis, executive overreach, authoritarianism, or fascism. Why? And he said, in short, being smart isn't using buzzwords. It's communicating what's at stake in people's lives when they don't have an opportunity to share in the decision making, but they share in the consequences when these things go awry. Everyone understands that sometimes in our efforts to be rigorous, we forget that the most powerful ideas are usually simple. Then he used a quote saying that the most important office in a democracy is the office of citizens. We have failed to treat it as such. The consequences of people being in office and being ill-equipped to do the duties of that office are evident in terms of how we are acting as a political community. But I ask you to follow me down this road. This can be said about the MOCCME Church and the Universal Church as well. So for my panelists, my next question is, in a world where people love to hear big words because they make you seem like you know what you are talking about, or that you have the education to be able to tell them something that someone else has been telling them for the past 25 years, how do you see us just keeping it simple and get at the core problems that we face now? Build relationships and help organize efforts to address the problems that are walking the streets we call our community.
Thanks for the question. I think you made a very good point when you said that there are some things we make very complicated, but they actually are very simple. And then I also think sometimes when we're looking at a macro view, a broad view, a wider view, we miss some of the fine details, right? And so when we think about in the social justice lens, when you think about the Target boycott that Pastor Jamal Bryant and others have undertaken, this was a movement. I've always said movements can be started by one person, but they're continued by many. And we think the Target boycott is this big thing that just started in 2025, or we think the Dollar General boycott or Amazon or all these different companies that are not investing in us when we invest our dollars into them. We think this is some thing that just started. We think this is some big concept, but not really, because it took one woman on December 1st, 1955 to say, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, and she didn't give up her seat. And from there, they started a movement with the Montgomery bus boycott, and there, by impacting their dollars, the bus system ended up being integrated. So again, we think these are new ideas. We think these are things that are complicated, the best way for us to do some things is simply to get together and follow one plan. I'm going to pick on my Dallas Cowboy fans for a second because I love y'all so much. You know, Dallas Cowboy fans say it is their year every year. Amen. Amen. And it's y'all year again, right? All right. All right. Haven't won since 1996. But my point is, simply, is that the reason that some teams or whatnot, when they go into these championships or going into games, that they cannot win is because everybody's not following the same plan. How are we going to win a game and everybody ain't following the same plan and following what the coach says do? So we got to, and God is our coach, we got to learn how to literally follow the same plan.
In terms of keeping it simple, it's important for us to understand the power we have as the people. And the simple word, four-letter word, stop. That's all we have to do. The church has tremendous power to turn our very government and society upside down. And I suggest that four-letter word, stop, making it simple. Stop buying, stop trading, stop selling, stop shopping with them. Just simply stop. The bus boycott was successful because they stopped. They didn't ride, they carpooled, they walked, they did what they have to do. Sacrifice for the greater good of the future. The society we live in now has groomed us to be comfortable. Everything is drive-through and window ready. And so when, like Bishop said earlier, when service to our community is inconvenient, we search for a convenient service. And we have to get outside of the mindset of convenience and become more inconvenient with what we're doing. Sometimes that means going out there and see what it feels like to sleep on the street when you're homeless in 100-degree weather. Sit down out there on the street with them while they sweat and look for shelter. Go outside and see what it's like to be outside in the middle of the night when it's 30 degrees outside and you're freezing. Touch these people, to encourage each other to stop spending your dollars where you're not welcomed. We spend $1.9 trillion as a people each year. We have the money to start our own thing. So my suggestion, if the CME Church, the way we started with 41 ex-slaves who turned everything upside down and made our own, we have that same power to do it today. We can lead a movement and tell the whole world to just stop for a moment, and it will crash the system, and they will have to listen to us. So like he said earlier, it's keeping it simple, and I think it will take us very far.
Cameron, it's interesting you used the word movement because the next question says that he was asked was, what does the movement to fix this failure look like? Is it marching in the streets? And part of his rebuttal was, let me try to get at this way. Before there was a national conversation about health care for all, there were people who went to medical school and set up offices in areas in the South where health care was not being given to all people. Similarly, before we had civil rights laws, there were lawyers, black, white, Jewish, etc., who started thinking about why certain populations aren't able to get certain rights and what it will take to fix that. The same could be said of clergy. You had some clergy fighting to make sure segregation is the law of the land in the South, and then you get a cascade of other voices who say God is calling us to demonstrate what the faith requires of us. And here is what it looks like. There were countless pastors who were white who fought with their churches regularly and lost their jobs. They demonstrated in real time what it meant to walk by faith. So are we willing to lose our jobs? Are we willing to lose our seat at the episcopacy? Are we willing to lose the first, second, or third church on the district? Are we willing to lose our positions of power or our elected positions in government? Are we willing to lose our family business or lose the degrees on the walls or the trophies on our shelves? Another quote I took for him was, "There are wonderful people giving expressions of love and care all the time. If you forget them, then you disrespect the day-to-day care people give, the day-to-day fight to make democracy and justice real, and the day-to-day fight to help every child get educated." One challenge with day-to-day activities is that it can be hard for many people to feel like they're a part of a broader movement. How do we fix this, he says? We have to do better at sharing the good news. Look at what this church, this community, these people are doing. Some people will say, oh, that's not a big deal. It's not really changing anything. Yet the ability to articulate what the expression of faith should be, even if it seems like it's not being heard, that's a tremendous amount of courage. Now, I petition to you, we don't have to do the biggest projects or the most exciting projects, but being present in people's vulnerable moments go a long way. So my next question for the panel is, what is a failure in your current community and in our current climate? What are some things we can put in motion locally to organize and execute to fix the failures we face now and those that may arise?
Hey, man, what are some things locally we could do? As myself and Reverend Fuzz were going through a police clergy academy, we found out that there's 4,000 churches in the city of Memphis. And 13,000 nonprofits. There are 4,000 churches in the city of Memphis, yet every day you turn on the news, all hell is breaking loose. There's 4,000 churches with at least one member, with at least one person that says, I am a believer in Jesus Christ. And all I want to see is the world better. I want to see my fellow man have a relationship with Jesus the Christ. I want to see my fellow man have a love and a passion for the work that they do, not just for self, but for others. And I want to be compelled to move in a way that helps them. 4,000 people, yet every day we wake up, there are juveniles breaking into cars, there are people killing people, our jails are overrun, they're killing people in the jails. We're constantly dealing with the same thing, yet nobody is mad enough and raised enough to say, hey, we gotta do right by people. Nobody's able to stand up and say, what are we doing to do right by people? What are we doing to do right by the people of God? How are we engaging each and every day? I can't speak for anybody else, but I know my people in the community. I walk my community. I've sat on stoops with my folks. I've gone to the bodegas and talked to them. I've bought their little snacks so the kids could have something to eat. And I know what's going on. I know what they're crying for. How can we change that? Now, I've got some of the greatest members in the CME church because they love people. And they get out and they go and they say, well, we're going to do a community dinner because we hear that they're hungry. But that's more than just a temporary fix, as Bishop said earlier. We constantly have to reach out to them. If we're engaged, actively, intentionally engaged with those around us, we come into those situations where we say, no, I can't keep letting this happen. I can't keep allowing people to be stepped on and looked over because of how they look, how they smell, what their educational background is, We are followers of Christ. We're supposed to love people. We're supposed to want to see everything better, yet we look down on people because they sin differently than we do. And I say that a lot because it's the truth. Because they don't have our degrees, because they don't have the cars we want them to have, or the salaries we think they should make, and I've heard it said, we do these things, but we as a church, the epicenter of most communities, especially when it comes to the black diaspora, have to bring back the village and say, what can we do to make this better? What can we do? Do we need to come by your house and tutor little Johnny because he ain't doing so good in math? And show those small ways of caring and loving. Yeah, I know we live in a different age, but if we stop being so afraid of people and allow God to lead us, we'll be able to do some actual work.
Earlier in minister examination presentation, Walter Brown was presenting, and we were talking about ways to reach. And we have to be unconventional. One of the solutions is being unconventional. You have to roll the dice and take chances. And what does that look like? I've said it before. I'll say it again because it's working. But during Halloween, we have Superhero Sunday. And I will put on a hot costume for the kids. And I've preached as Batman, Spider-Man, Sub-Zero, and all the other characters. And they look forward to that worship service each year to see their pastor in a costume preaching as their favorite superhero, balloons all in the sanctuary, to see their elders, not just their pastor, their children. I'm talking 80-plus-year-old men and women in costumes and wigs and makeup all over their face. And then after worship service, we have a big festival. I have a friend from seminary who does beer and Bible study. Uh-oh. Some of y'all drink beer at home when you close the door. Hush. The thing is, the Bible says not to get drunk. It tells you to have self-control. And it's okay to meet the people of the world where they are. It's up to you to have self-control, to be those who represent Christ, to be the hands and foot of Jesus Christ. You can do that in their environments, but you have to go to them. Jesus went to the prostitutes, the tax collectors, and those who are downtrodden and on the outskirts of our society. You have to go to the GDs, the BDs, the Bloods, the Crips, the prostitutes, and all those people you deem unworthy, and touch them, eat with them, drink with them, be merry with them, cry with them. And they will, I guarantee you, they'll come to the church asking, what must I do to learn who this Jesus is? But the longer we only open our churches on Wednesdays for Bible study and Sundays for worship service, no one's coming to see what we're doing. I suggest be unconventional. Roll the dice. Worry about what people say later and do what God tells you to do now. And I guarantee you, you'll be all right.
Say something quickly. Dr. Kevin Cosby, who is the president of Simmons College in Louisville, Kentucky, but also pastors the largest black church in Kentucky. He said the best of us were lured away from the rest of us, which caused a brain and a resource drain in our communities. We are in constant competition. We are constantly in competition, whether we think that we are or not. I mean, we may not look like it even now that we're in competition with each other, but we all sit up here trying to figure out, now what she say or what he get ready to say, because I need to say something that's good or better than what they said. But when we are constantly in competition, not just with ourselves, but the church don't want to think, our communities, we don't want to think that we're in competition with each other. We don't want to think that we're in competition with the world, but we are. And as soon as we realize that, we will realize that one of the failures that we have done for ourselves and our communities is not taught each other how to move past the competition. And when we don't do that, then we do end up in a place where we create these silos and these schisms and this I'm not as good as or they're better than, and then we just have this continued breakdown. And so as soon as we realize that, number one, failure is not meant to keep us down, but is to teach us how to learn to continue to build ourselves. But as soon as we learn how to not be in competition to the point that it breaks down relationship, then I think that we will be able to move past together some of the failures that we have so that we can build our lives back together.
Thank you. Then he was asked, how would you advise Christians to think about where to invest their time and efforts? He said, faith leaders can offer those they lead a more expansive view of how Christian stories can help them see the moment they're in. He gave a really nice example. And if you go to Sunday school, it look like some of y'all go to Sunday school in here. If you go to Sunday school, you learned about Cain and Abel a couple Sundays ago. And he said a friend was trying to think about the threat of violence in his community. Their church was more interested in, we've got to give God our gifts in our time. I told the story of Cain and Abel because it's the first time in the biblical story where you get the ideal of somebody giving an offering to God. Interestingly enough, the character who gives it later goes and kills his brother. It's a story that helps us struggle with how Christians have a habit of hurting our brothers or sisters in private and trying to make gestures to God in public. What does that mean for us? Well, do you think you can come to church and give your tithes if you're not paying attention to what happens to deportation and immigration in your area? Do you think you can do that when your community has a police force that preys on poor people? My friend experimented with this story, and in creating a watershed moment for some of his people, they started raising money to support a local group who was trying to make sure that their sanitary cities and community had more resources to make sure that people were not harmed. That's what happens when the story that people have confidence in gives them a new window into the world. So while I was attending Memphis Theological Seminary, my classes on mission and evangelism were some of my by far favorite classes, and we learned that every church without the funds can partner with organizations that are doing the work. And I'm not talking about just bags once a year at annual conference. We look at mission and evangelism as something we go do, but God is already doing it. He is just asking us to join in the work He's already doing in the world. It's not just socks in the winter and box fans in the summer, but really getting to people's needs. It's funny, I had already wrote this, but Bishop told us earlier we have to go deep. We have to get to those needs. And getting to those needs, we have to start building a continuous stream of mission with them, not just changing of the season or on special holidays. If it's something you personally care about, join in the mission that God is already doing. My next question is, in our current climate, what are some of the small things even the small member congregations can do on a consistent basis to invest their time and efforts? I didn't say money, I said time and effort. And what do you do when the laity doesn't want to invest their time and effort?
I'm going to let some of the other panelists speak to the more concrete things, but on the subject of consistency, I want to say, other than, let's say, Bible study and Sunday or maybe choir rehearsal, when is your church open? Because often we don't think about it, but how can people get to the church if the doors are always locked? I just want to put that in your mind. How can people get the help they need, the support they need, if every time they drive by, lock, lights off?
And can I say on that, the other side of that spectrum, because there are people who are like me who, and have been like me, who live in the city but pastor in rural areas, and so you're not always available at the drop of a hat to just go out there and be at the community, or you didn't grow up in that community, so they don't really know you. They might know of you. They're just like, oh, such and such got a new pastor. But we have to utilize the gift of technology. Like, technology obviously is great when it works. Like we saw today, like we were really expecting technology to come through for us, and it let us down. But simply creating a Facebook page for your church. I'm not saying you got to be on there all day. If you don't have young people at your church, somebody in your church is on Facebook at least once a day. And if they don't do anything but on Sunday and just, post something that you said, or throughout the week, post a Bible verse, or says, Daintyville CME Church loves their community, or hey, we just want to let you know that if you need anything, you can reach us. Even if it's just the constant post, you can come by and see us, you can email us at this place. Utilize technology to your advantage. It will put you out there and make you a very easy, recognizable voice, so that when you do go out, you're just like, oh, I'm such and such from such and such. They'll be like, oh yeah, I heard I'm friends with one of your members whose cousin is my best friend's baby daddy, mama, like whatever. But they'll know that they saw you because they recognized you through some kind of technological connection. It does not have to be, they keep saying it, we really overcomplicate it. It can be something very simple. Instagram, do it. TikTok, Facebook, do something to put you out in the system so that you can be recognized some way, somehow.
Adding to what she said, when I am in a new area, if I'm in a city I don't know, I go and I Google. If your church is not Googleable, searchable, if you are not within a certain area and it doesn't pop up, you are invisible to everybody below the age of 35. I'm just saying, if you are not on a major street, you are invisible. You're off the face of the earth. How do we know to find you? If you do not have a consistent phone number that is answerable, you are 50 years behind. If you don't have an email that somebody responds to, you 30 years behind. Come on, AOL, got mail. Okay. So please, we make it too complicated.
Just to the lay portion, I think one of the greatest things that we as leaders can do is training. I can't stress enough, trainings for your lay people. One of the greatest success stories out of Winrow right now is a young lady who had never been to annual conference, never been to district conference, never been to anything other than what happened at her church. And I made her the Board of Christian Education Director. And she said, well, Pastor, I don't know how to do that. And I said, okay, well, we're going to train you. First off, here's a discipline. What does the discipline say about you? Read that. She read what it said, and she was like, oh, so this is what it's supposed to do? And this, that, and that. So I said, okay, well, let's also connect you with some people who understand this a little better. So in that training process, in that stage, she's a delegate to the annual conference last year. She came and she enjoyed it, she experienced it, she said, oh my God, I want to do it again. She's back this year as a delegate to the annual conference. She's learning more. She wants to do more. The kids had never been to a Connectional Youth and Young Adult Conference, but that was an experience. When we do the training and give them a zeal for what the work that is that they're doing, they'll be more willing to say, okay, yeah, let's try some stuff out. And then when you show them you're crazy, religious crazy, it can work for you. When you just have that radicalness that says, hey, let's try something and see what happens. When they see that you're truly following God and willing to train them on how to do the work, it works out for us.
The next question he was asked, she said, I like how you expand what counts as activism and being part of a movement. How else can people get involved, especially if they're feeling anxious to help? He says, first, the fact that you care is already expressing activism. So you're already on the right train. It's not as if you need to become a new person now. Are things happening in your zip code that you think are not the best expression of treating humans the way God wants? Me personally, I think we all can name a few things in the zip code your church is in and my church is in that needs to be addressed. And I am sure there is some organization or group you can work with to help resolve those issues. He then says, my reservation is that I've noticed that people who are trying to do the big thing sometimes are not even doing the things in their backyard. It should have been more people saying amen. And they are overwhelmed because they assume the big things fix the backyard. The problem is the backyard left unattended becomes a jungle. There wasn't a national movement for white Christian nationalism. There were pastors giving voice to those ideas over decades, writing books and on talk radio. Those practices then coincided and were expressed in national politics. I would argue, particularly for Christians, the agency of one person in their neighborhood or town can have ripple effects that you could never quantify. It does no good for you to be talking about justice at the national level while you allow authoritarians to rule your community or allow the police in your community to consistently profile different people. If you care about education in your backyard, and if everyone were doing the work, it's a lot harder to cut the education department by 50%. Take care of your backyard, he says. My next question is, what does your backyard look like? Where is your backyard? Is it already a jungle? And if it is, what are some of the tools we can use to cut down the jungle?
Great question. Your backyard is your, y'all funny, is your neighborhood and your zip code. How can you serve the people nearest you if you don't even know what they need? Y'all quiet, but it's cool, you know, like real talk. Because take Mount Olive Cathedral, for example. We are in the 38126 neighborhood, zip code. 38126 zip code is not only one of the poorest zip codes in this city and in this state, but it's also one of the poorest zip codes in this country, right in our backyard, right where this church resides. We have 38126 when you go out those doors where you enter today. If you were to go downtown to the FedEx Forum, that's 38104, all right, and all to the north as well. In 38126 and 38104 have completely different issues from one another. You have to do some research. Somebody say context is key. It's just like a preacher. You don't want a preacher to get up and start talking about something and they don't got no context. Well, it's the same thing with our churches. Because 38126, where they're building a lot of affordable housing, has majority single-family homes, but it's a lot of people over there. And it's a lot of low-income families over there. Then you go over here to 38104 to the north and to the west of this church, and you see a lot of people who make a lot of money in these high-rise apartments. It's completely two different populations to serve. But at the end of the day, the day got to end, that's what Glorilla said. But at the end of the day, even with 38126 and 38104, there's work to be done.
Don't laugh at me. Our backyard, well, One of the things you have to learn about your backyard is knowing like your location, kind of like what Cam said, but I mean like even spiritually knowing your location. Because sometimes we get into these houses or we get into these locations and we are not in the right house. We're not in the right spirit house. And I hope I don't lose my appointment when I say this, but there are a lot of us who end up in pastoral positions who are not called to pastor. Pastoring is a calling. It is not a job position that you should just apply for because you think you're going to make some extra money. And if you're definitely in the See Me church, that's absolutely not what you should be trying to do. I'm just kidding, sort of. But I'm using that because that's a wheelhouse that I'm in. I can say that about me because that's my backyard. But if you are a teacher and you don't like children, you in the wrong house. If you are somebody who's working with the media ministry and you don't like to get involved in technology or you don't want to even upgrade your cell phone, you in the wrong house. So that means that your backyard is going to turn into a jungle because you are not going to be in the place where your skill set, where your calling has been, the gifts you've been given are made for that. I don't need to try to, what you don't want is for me to work on your head. That's not my gift. That's not my backyard. I promise you, you're going to look just like me. You're not going to have, it's going to be low. So what we have to first start doing before we talk about backyards is making sure that we have made a home at the right address. And if you are in the right address, meaning that you have talked to the Lord, you have prayed, you have fasted, you know that this is the gift, this is the lane that God wants you to be working in, then you are more readily available and it's easier for you to see, okay, this is my backyard. Now, what do I need to do to make sure that it is maintained and doesn't turn into something that is overwhelming? And if I know that I'm not good at keeping plants alive, Lord, send me a landscaper. Send me somebody with a green thumb who can help me keep this piece of my backyard alive.
Then the question was raised, any other advice you offer the anxious and overwhelmed in this moment? And Mr. Williams said the conflicts visible in the world are conflicts we already have warring within us. If you make the world out to be the monster and you somehow are the angel of light that's going to save the world and resist, then you're telling yourself a story that's not even authentic to the Christian faith. The problem we see is a human problem. Our capacity to do evil, to be cruel, our capacity to hoard, to steal, our capacity to think there's security in hoarding rather than sharing. Humanity didn't just start having these problems with the election cycle. It's been going on. Christian faith gives you tools to deal with human problems it scales. You are human. You know what seduces you. You know what moves you. You know why you let things go. You know why you are more inclined to not care about this group versus that group and can challenge yourself to be the light you have to be. That message feels so small in moments where the problem seems so big, yet it's imperative for those who profess Christian faith to recognize that human fragility is the condition of the human community. We have responses to that, and the responses you have are enough to give light to a dark world. So my last question I will raise is, so if we have the tools, we know the problems. Why is it that we are not doing the work? And I'm not saying we as just us or we as just you, but we as a collective. And I know it get dark and I can't drive in the dark. We say that a lot, but some people is here past dark to make sure they got elected to go as delegates.
He said what he said. All truth, no shade. But to the question, amen. To the question, it goes back to a little bit of what Bishop Thomas said earlier. And I've seen this in school, we're so clicked up, we're so divided. We want to say, well, this is not the way we've done it before. Let's keep doing it the way we've been doing it. We say, we don't put our actions and our budgets where our mouths are. We talk a whole lot, but we do a little. I'm gonna say it again. We talk a lot, but we do a little. We get an A for talking and an F for the actual results. You know, we really have to be intentional and innovative when it comes to ministry. It's twofold, intentional and innovative. We have to make sure that our budgets align. If we can pay $300, $400, $500, $600 for a preacher to come visit, we can pay that into children's ministry. So we have to be intentional and innovative.
I think one of the reasons we don't use the tools that we have is because we're afraid. You know, we're afraid somebody's going to take our position. We're afraid somebody's going to outshine us in something we've been doing for the last 40 years the first time they do it and make it better than we've done it. Oh, no. We're so fearful of success that we'll hold ourselves back because the people we have in place that we say we want to do the work, we want to micromanage the work that they do. So when we start allowing the work to be done by the people we're putting in place and trusting that we put the right people in place, not by popularity, but because they have the skill set to make it happen, then trust them to do the job that we're paying them to do. And I think if we do that and we truly, and that goes in all areas, we have CPAs in the church. We have contractors and HVAC people and painters and graphic designers and all manners of people, but we will outsource to the world what we could be keeping in our own church, supporting our own people who are paying their 10% into the church anyway.
May I suggest that we stop asking for permission to do what God has called us to do and what our bishop has entrusted pastors and leaders of the church to do. It seems sometimes that we wait for someone to get along with our idea and we wait for people to support it. I encourage you all to do what God has called you to do. You young adults, you leaders, pastors, if God has given you the vision, don't wait for permission. Do what God has called you to do. And also delegate the responsibility. I don't wait for someone to volunteer. I say, Mama Missy Turnage, can you take over this at the church? And yeah, I called you out, Mama. But I just call your name and I say, can you do it? And it works every time. Delegate the responsibility. Don't wait for permission. Just do what God called you to do.
I'm going to speak quickly before the pastor beats me up. But again, I want to go back to we don't know who we are. Or maybe we've forgotten who we are. And again, this is not because the whole article was not about the black church. It was about us all. We do not remember who we are. I mean, Mufasa said it in the Clouds December, remember who you are. If we as the church, we should be the voice for the world, not the world being the voice for the church. And that is what it has flipped into be. So if you don't know that God has called you that you have the gifts of service, if you don't know that one voice that we do not like to talk about in the church, if you don't know that God has called you to be a prophet, if you don't know that God has called you to be an apostle, or you do know and the church doesn't help you cultivate that and recognize it, we are going to miss a lot of what we have the tools, but of course we don't know how to use the tools because we don't know who we are. We have to understand who we are. They're not just prophets, they're not just teachers, they're not just pastors, teachers, and evangelists. There are prophets, there are apostles, there are healers, there are people of faith, there are people who have service, there are people who have knowledge, there are people with administrative skills, there are intercessors, people who have mercy. If you don't know who God has called you to be, if you don't know you're a wrench, how do you get used to build something? So we need to remember who we are.
On the subject of that, and going back to kind of how it was mentioned earlier today, how we end up in all of these groups. Bishop talked this morning about how we end up in all of these groups, and we're not talking to each other, we're just talking within our groups. And what often ends up happening is over time, it's one group left in the church, and everybody else is gone. And you look up, and it's 4 members. And you said, how did this happen? And that's because, like all of them said before, the tools are not getting utilized, the communication is not present, and we are not making space for that to happen. And Reverend Fuzz was talking about a wrench, and the problem is we want what we want, so we often try to use a wrench like a hammer, or use a wrench like a screwdriver. I tell you this, if you use a wrench on a Phillips head screw, you get nowhere. And we are constantly putting people in the wrong places, doing the wrong things because it looks easy. It's what we can identify and grab onto. But that doesn't mean that's what God called them to do, and that doesn't mean that's where they're most useful. And when you don't feel useful, when you don't feel needed, when you don't feel appreciated, you pack up and go, and now you're left with 4 members. My challenge to everyone is to see who is there. The scriptures talk so much about angels being there and we are unaware, and Jesus showing up as other people, and we still don't see it because we're not looking for it. So instead of assuming what's there, really take a minute and look at what you already have and start getting outside of the box. If what you've been doing hasn't been working, then it's time to get creative.
Thank you. Brother Chris, we still have Jarvis home. Chris? No, he left? Okay. Bishop said we have to cut it.
Ministry. The ministries can't do everything. What? I said, what I really wanted to hear from this group was some innovative ideas of what you see from social justice. All of these things you talked about is social justice, community engagement outside of your individual church, not your little community. It could be overseas someplace. Fred Smith, I don't even know if he was a Christian, but look how many jobs he created. I want to spend some time with you all because you're young, you're beautiful, and I love you, but you got to get out of this box. If you got those homeless people in the church, can they tithe? They gonna bring you some money? They need food, shelter, and clothing. So where are the real estate people, the real estate giants who are building apartment buildings so that we have ownership? Where's our Black Oklahoma? We don't have hotels to live in. We still gotta go to other people's hotels. And we have more conferences than the law allows. We don't have grocery stores. That's why we can't have the right kind of food. We don't have community gardens big enough for the food supply chain. Now, I'm going to stop because I've been on needles and pins all this time, and I know you all got something else to do. But young people, it's up to you now. Those people that marched and did the boycott that you're talking about, they were serious. They weren't. Ben Hooks was a minister on Sunday. But what did Ben do on Monday? He was out there for the NAACP.
But to that,
I don't want a response.
no, to that, what
In closing, in my seminary training, in reading what Dr. Jarvis Williams wrote, well, his interviewer wrote, our backyard, doing things in our backyard is what helps our community, which in turns help our state, which in turns help our country, which in turns help our world. We have to get back, like he said, to the simple things. Your ideas don't have to be these big extravagant things. We don't have to pack out the Grizzly game where nobody else can come. We don't have to pack out the local park where nobody else can play on the playground. It can be just the simple things. We have to be innovative. We have to ask questions. You have to understand what the people need. You wonder why you don't have children in your church. But have you asked the children that are in your church what excites them? What excites their friends? Have you even asked them to invite their friends? It's just as small as that. It's some of the smallest things we can do to impact our communities. And even if you do have what they said was a 4-member church, there are organizations you can partner with that doesn't cost you a dime. You still can play your conference claims. It won't cost you a dime to partner with them. But we have to start doing the walking like our forefathers and mothers did and stop doing the talking. And that's all we have. Thank you, Bishop, for the opportunity.